Good evening. This special board meeting of the Board of Trustees of Socorro ISD is being held March 31st, 2020. The time is 5:30. I do have the script to read. On March 16th, Governor Greg Abbott granted a request by Attorney General Ken Paxton to temporarily suspend a limited number of open meetings laws in the extent necessary to allow telephonic or video conference meetings in response to the coronavirus COVID-19. In accordance with those suspended rules, we certify the following. Notice of this meeting has been posted online for at least 72 hours. Number one, although members of the board are not gathered in a central physical location, we do have a quorum in attendance at this meeting by telephone call and internet access. Number two, we are meeting by use of both telephone conference call, online access, and through use of an email link for questions. Number three, if a member of the public submitted written comments in advance, the board president or a member of the administration will read the comments into record before or during the board's consideration of that item. If you'd like to provide comment at a future meeting conducted by video conference or telephone call, please follow instructions on the meeting notice. Number four, all other meeting procedures will adhere to board adopted procedures to the extent practical. Number five, an audio recording of this meeting is being made and will be available to the public at a later date. Number six, we apologize in advance for any unforeseeable difficulties and ask for your patience as we navigate unprecedented conditions. Number seven, if you have any questions about these suspended laws, please call the Office of the Attorney General at 888-672-6787. And now I'll do a roll call to establish a quorum. Ms. Rodriguez?
I'm here.
Mr. Guetta?
Present.
Mr. Gondeta? I believe Mr. Gondeta was running late. Will y'all notify us when he signs on, please?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Mena?
Present.
Paul Garcia?
Present.
And David Morales?
Present.
Okay. We do have a quorum of the board members. In order for our audio recording to be clear, we're going to have to do things a little differently tonight. If you have questions about an agenda item, please state your name and wait to be acknowledged before asking your questions. Also, when making a motion or a second, please state your name first. When I ask for the vote, I will do so with a roll call for each board member. And if you'll all please rise now and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And we will continue with item number 2, board workshop, a budget presentation. Mr. Ressa.
Yes, President Nájera, Dr. Espinosa, members of the board. I am Tony Ressa, Chief Financial Officer for the district. And tonight, we'll be discussing the 2021 preliminary general fund budget as well as current proposed maintenance or operation tax rate. So members of the board, budget presentations are not always easy to follow, much less when they're done remotely. But I will endeavor to present them as clearly as possible and ensure that I will inform you when I'm moving from one presentation to the other. Or I'm saying one slide to another. And I think you have a hard copy of the presentation that I will be discussing. So we go to page 2 or slide 2. On slide 2, you'll see the agenda that we'll discuss today. I'll briefly kind of go over the changes to House Bill 3 that impact school funding. I will then like to transition into the property tax changes that are mandated by House Bill 3 for the upcoming fiscal year. I will try to give you highlights without getting too much into the weeds. From here, we'll kind of go over the budget cost drivers for 2021, as well as provide you with a summary amounts of the budget on a function level. We'll then discuss possible COVID-19 budget impacts. And finally, we'll discuss the May 5th budget workshop agenda. So if we can turn to slide number 3, Just briefly, what I want to kind of go over is certainly some of the changes in House Bill 3. Primarily, the increase in the basic allotment to $6,160. The House Bill 3 also repealed certain allotments, high school allotment, staff allotment, cost of education index, as well as the gifted and talented allotment. So just keep in mind that the allotment for gifted and talented was really rolled into the basic allotment, and we're still required to have a gifted and talented program. With respect to career and technology education, those grades were expanded from 6th to the 8th grade. There was an increase in the bilingual allotment as well as additional allotment for dual language. They created what's called the career, college, and military readiness allotment, as well as the dyslexia allotment, and an increase in state compensatory education allotment based on the census blocks that are determined by the commissioner. So we turn to page or slide 4. If there's no questions. Just going over some of the additional changes, and that's districts must offer a full-day pre-kindergarten for all eligible 4-year-olds. The districts are also entitled to an early education allotment for each student that's in kindergarten to the 3rd grade. If the student is each educationally disadvantaged or is a student of limited English proficiency, who's in bilingual ed or special education program. Just keep in mind that this allotment is also designed to implement the reading academies as well as to provide funding to cover the second half of the full-day pre-kindergarten program. And finally, you have the transportation allotment that's now funded on a per-mile allotment and not linear density. It's something for us to consider that currently with the COVID pandemic, we're not transporting kids, so we might have a shortfall on our transportation allotment for this current fiscal year. So we turn to page or slide 5. Some of the additional changes, districts can apply for a teacher incentive allotment, whereby each classroom teacher designated under a local optional teacher designation system, a teacher may receive up from $3,000 up to $32,000. Keep in mind that Socorro ISD is certainly looking at that, looking to see if we can implement something to that degree next fiscal year. Also, just as a reminder, in a year when the basic allotment increases, the district must use 30% of that gain for compensation increases. So the basic allotment is still the same, so we don't have to adhere to that particular requirement. And then finally, House Bill 3 holds that all school districts' property values that grow more than 2.5% will have to have their maintenance and operation tax rates reduced. So what I'd like to do is kind of spend some time on this part of the change of House Bill 3. But before I do that, I just want to kind of give you a reminder of the components of our district tax rates. So if you turn to slide number 6, you'll see that our district tax rate is composed of 2 parts. The maintenance and operations tax rate, which is called the M&O tax rate, and that's used to fund the day-to-day operations of the district. So the legal limit for the M&O tax rate is the maximum compressed tax rate plus 17 cents. And on top of that, you have the interest and sinking fund tax rate, what we call the INS tax rate. This rate is used to finance voter-approved bonded indebtedness. The tax rate must be sufficient to meet the yearly bond payments, and the legal limit is 50 cents. Right now, our INS tax rate is 40 cents, so we have a capacity of 10 more cents in the INS tax rate for future bond issuances or bond elections. So we turn to page 7. It's important for me to kind of explain the changes that are going to be made under House Bill 3 with respect to our tax rate. So in Tier 1, you have what's called the maximum compressed tax rate, what we call the MCR. That's the M&O tax rates that's necessary to generate 100% of the basic allotment. From here, the district can increase that tax rate and capture what's called Tier 2 additional revenue. So under level 1, you can go up 8 pennies. So these are called golden pennies. We could generate an additional yield of 98.56 per watt. And then from there, a district can go up 9 pennies, what are called copper pennies, for a lower yield. But most likely, school districts would have to have an election to go to this rate. So where are we right now? Let's turn to slide number 8. Just to tell you, right now, if you look at the bottom bullet, we're at 97 cents. That's our maintenance and operations tax rate. How do we get there? Well, we started off the year before at 98.16 cents. We were required by House Bill 3 for this year to reduce it to 93 cents. That's the maximum compressed tax rate. And then we were allowed by statute to go up 4 golden pennies. And so we're at 97 cents. So that's where we are right now. Let's talk about what House Bill 3 is requiring us to do with respect to our tax rate for next year. Districts are going to be required to further reduce their tax rate. And we're going to be limited to 2.5% limitation, and it'll be factored into our tax rate calculation. So I'm going to ask for your forbearance and patience as I kind of go through a little bit of the weeds with respect to how we're going to calculate that. So we're going to have to do two calculations. Tax rate compression will be done on a statewide basis, and it'll be done on a local basis. And the calculation with the highest compression rate or the lowest tax rate is the one that the school district will have to adopt this upcoming fiscal year. The comptroller has already determined that the statewide property value growth is 4.01%. Having said that, you'll see the calculation that's being used for the statewide comparison. You'll see it's 93 cents, which is last year's MCR. They're factoring the 2.5% calculation, reducing it by the 4% growth. So we have to do a calculation where on the state side, our MCR is going to be reduced to 91.64 cents. If a school district's property value growth, in other words, is from 0 to 4.01%, this is the tax rate that we have to compress it to, and then from there we can raise it if we so choose to. If it's higher than that, then a school district will be required to further reduce their tax rate. So we go to slide number 10, I can explain how that's going to be impacted. So once we determine our MCR, and I'm on slide number 11, a school district can go up 5 cents this fiscal year that's coming up, but it's going to require a unanimous vote from the board. That unanimous vote is only required in fiscal year 2021. In 2022, it could be a majority vote. But let's say we don't have a unanimous vote. If we have a majority vote, then the most that we can go up from the MCR is 4 pennies. And if we do that, we'll lose about $5.8 million in funding. So because we're lowering the golden pennies, we're getting one less golden pennies than we're entitled to. What is clear is this, that the maintenance and operation tax rate for Socorro ISD is going to go down. The question is how much? And so what I've given you an example of, if our tax rate goes up, let's say 6%, then chances are we're going to be reduced further. So I think I might have slipped one slide. Let's see. If we go to slide number 10, and my apologies, I want to just say something. I'm projecting before the pandemic that our property values would go up 5.05%. So again, I'm on slide number 10. I'm sorry, I think I skipped it. So at that rate, our tax rate's going to have to start off at 90.74 cents. That's the understanding that's the estimate that I'm getting that I thought we would have. However, we have COVID-19, coronavirus. There's a lot of people that are losing their jobs. There are a lot of people that, bottom line, are going to be having a hard time meeting their taxes and so forth. So chances are that we're going to have a lower increase in our property values. Now, the Central Appraisal District sets values as of January the 1st. And there's nothing in the statute that says they can adjust it during the year if there's a pandemic. The only thing that's going to happen is you're going to have higher than normal property tax protests. So what it comes down to. And so what they've told me is that, look, there's going to be an impact on your values probably next year, but this year we can't. It's already set, and not only that, it's a reappraisal year. So my feeling is that we may get 5%, it might be 6%, but anything over 4.01%, we will have to reduce their tax rate. And from there, the board can approve a recommendation of going up 5 cents from there. What the state is assuring us that is as the rate goes down, state funding will increase to cover that decrease in property tax collections on a dollar for dollar basis. So again, so what we do is we'll have our maintenance and operate our MCR, which I'm projecting at this point to be the state rate, which is 4.01%. And then from there, we're going to ask the board to approve an increase. So let's go to page 12 or slide 12. So right now our tax rate is at 97 cents for the current time. And again, I want to emphasize certain things about our budget. Things will change. Revenue estimates are going to change. The assumptions we're going to make are going to change. The same thing with the budget. This is simply a starting point with respect to how we start determining what our budget's going to be and the tax rate that we're going to assume. So because of what's going on with respect to the economy, we're gonna make the assumption that our values are going to go up 4.01% for the time being, and that our maximum compressed tax rate is 91.64%, 91 cents 64 after that. And I can't speak for the board, but I would hope the board would consider allowing us to go up 5 pennies because of the fact that it's still a tax decrease, and at the same time we would generate an additional $5.8 million. So currently, what we're estimating is our maintenance and operation tax rate is going to be a little half of a penny decrease to 96.64. That's the current assumption that we're using. And as we get our values, our certified values, it could be that it could go lower than that. It could be maybe half a penny more. It could be another penny and a half. So it's something to remains to be seen. But I want to show the board, if you look at slide 13, that tax rates for the different school districts are going to change somewhat. This is currently on slide 13, the tax rates for all the school districts here in the area. And if you look at the maintenance and operation tax rate, you'll see a uniformity there. A lot of districts like El Paso ISD, Clint, Isleta, and Otillo are at $1.07. And that's because they were at $1.17 before that. Well, because the tax rate they're going to adopt is going to be based on the property value growth, it's going to vary. For example, Otillo is $1.07. Before the pandemic, they were projecting about 11% property value growth. So their tax rate is probably going to go down to about 97, 95 cents. El Paso, on the other hand, is looking at maybe 2 to 3% growth. So their property tax is going to be at about $1.03, $1.04. So what I want to just inform the board is that things are going to change. They're going to change significantly. So there won't be consistency when you look at the tax rates of the various school districts. It's all going to depend on their property value growth with respect to maintenance and operations tax rate. So let's look at the values, at the assumptions that we're using to determine our state funding. So slide 14 shows that currently when we're looking at a average daily attendance growth of 0.82% increase, which is 44,628 is our average daily attendance. I want to remind the board, these are just estimates. Things will change as we go through the budget process. We're looking at our weighted average attendance having a 0.8% growth, so to 61,138. And the comptroller's property tax division values that are used for state funding will grow by 4.01%, same as the statewide values. If we go to page 15 or slide 15, so currently what we're projecting is our tax rate's going to be a little less than half of a cent decrease at 96.64. That's looking at the compressed tax rate of 91.64 plus a board approved increase of 5 golden pennies. Again, as we get our values, they will change. We're projecting a tax roll of 10.5 billion, 4.01% growth from the prior year. We get our preliminary values in late April, and we get our certified values in July. Now, I just want to remind the board, we're going to have higher than normal property value protests. And that's because the economy is taking a big hit. We're going into a recession. So the state isn't going to be collecting tax receipts, sales tax receipts. Oil is going down to about, what, $30 a barrel, maybe the high 20s. So obviously, state revenue is going to be impacted. And so with respect to valuations, we're probably going to take a hit, or we'll probably have a lower than normal increase in property values, not this year, but the following year, because that's when the Central Appraisal District can be looking at values and determining whether values have to be adjusted. So with respect to our other assumptions, we're going to assume a 98% collection rate, and the yield per penny is $1,055,879. So on slide 16, we're looking at what we're projecting in state revenue by specific allotments. At the bottom, you'll see a subtotal of $380 million. When you take out the local share at the compressed tax rate, we're looking at state share and tier one funding of $277.6 million. So if we turn to slide 17, that shows our tier two funding. Again, if we go and the board unanimously approves an increase of 5 cents on the tier two, then we generate $23.8 million in tier two state funding. If we adopt 4 pennies, then you're looking at going down to about $8 million in revenue. So where do we stand on the revenue side? So currently under the revenue estimates, we're at $439.9 million. That is our revenue estimates currently. Please keep in mind that revenue estimates change as we get updated property value numbers, as we look closely at our average daily attendance to see if we have to adjust it. And when we get more updated information, you'll see local sources. Within there are interest earnings collections. I've had to make an adjustment and decrease it because of the fact that interest rates are going down to almost zero. And so certainly our interest earnings are going to be impacted as well. So what you see there is certainly with respect to local sources, I'm estimating an increase of $1.3 million out of the amended budget. When with state revenue, you'll see that there's an increase of about $4.9 million, okay? Again, when you look at the legislature and the biennium, the first year you have a big increase. From there, the increase is really predicated on our average daily attendance and student growth. Because right now what the state is saying is that they're wanting to make sure that if your values go up more than 2.5%, they're gonna decrease it and they're gonna make it up. So there's a limiting factor there. So you'll see that we're projected on a growth of average daily attendance of 0.82%. That could be amended later. As we get more information, we'll certainly look at that. So again, I want to remind the board that these are starting points. Things will change as we go forward. So what's in our current budget? So with respect to the budget, you'll see the cost drivers, okay? And it's important to realize that these are starting points. That's what's in the budget. So you'll see the commensurate pay increase that we have in our budget. I want the board to realize that that's a starting point. Okay, that's a starting point. That's not the final number. What we wanted to do is currently, as we're going through the budget, you have to make sure that we've included everything. Plus also keep in mind is that we have a pandemic going on currently. We don't know we have an idea of what might happen the year after next, but really we have to look on the long term as to how is that going to impact future revenue streams for the school district. And I want to remind the board that the majority of our budget comes from the state, about 74%. So it's important to realize that that's something we have to look at. But again, we have a general pay increase that's a starting point that we have there. We also have additional instructional positions for growth for the campuses in the dual language program. We have additional instructional positions for special education. We have funding to implement full day pre-kindergarten at the majority of our campuses. We have included the TASB stipend increase recommendations. We're providing funding for the laptops for the incoming freshman class. We have funding for the purchase of 20 school buses. And currently we have funding for staff development for the mandated reading academies that are going to be required based on how it's going to get funded for the early education allotment. So where do we stand on a function basis? So right now our budget is $439.5 billion. And as you can see, it's lower than our current amended budget by about $16 million. But I want the board to keep in mind is that we roll over encumbrances and contracts from the prior year into the new budget. So that bumps up the budget. We also added money so we can purchase 10 special ed buses. We've also added funding for full day pre-K for the instruction. So we've bumped up our budget. It's not an apples to apples comparison. And I want the board to realize that we will provide you at prior to our next budget meeting, we'll provide you a more detailed budget by function, as well as within each function, we're going to give you a line item of what's within there. And we compare that to the last year's adopted budget and the amended budget to provide you more information. So it's not that we're cutting things. It's just bottom line is that we always add in the fiscal year, additional items as we go through the year. So if you have any questions on any particular line item, I can certainly answer them for you. But I want you to rest assured is that we'll be providing you more information on the budget. And I want you to realize that we are amending it and changing it constantly as we go through the budget. So where do we stand right now? And again, if we go to slide 21, this is a starting point. So right now, our general revenue estimates are $439.9 million. Our expenditures are $49.5 million. So we have a surplus of $467,000. And so it allows us to certainly make changes with some of the things that we have in our budget. But it's important to keep in mind is that estimates are going to change and expenditures are going to change. And so this is just a starting point that we have. And so if you go to page 22, I just want to let the board know that currently we're reviewing vacancies to see if there are any vacancies that we miss, or any vacancies that maybe we add that we need to add, or maybe we duplicated vacancies. So this is an adjustment as we go through it. Additional department funding requests aren't in the budget currently, and neither is the TASB compensation study recommendation. So we're making adjustments as we're going through it. Also, we have a starting point with compensation. Certainly, it go up, and usually it's a starting point, especially right now when we're looking at a recession that's being faced possibly, and it is going to be faced by the nation and certainly by the state, which is certainly going to impact possible future funding streams in the next legislative session. So if we go to page or slide 23, the reason for this slide is because there was a question that I got from Trustee Garcia. So Mr. Garcia, would you like to kind of follow up with that question that you asked a while back?
Can you all hear me? Yes, okay. Hello?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Yeah, Tony, I called you earlier in the week because I did read a report from Bank of America, and it did state that they're calling it already that we're in a recession. And I'm just kind of curious to know from your perspective what that would look like for our district, what kind of impacts that would have, what kind of adjustments should we make? So just that quick question.
Yes, sir. So again, when you look at what's occurring right now, I mean, this country is looking like it's going into a recession without a doubt. You had almost 3 million individuals who filed for unemployment. So there's no sales tax, which is the main driver of revenue going into to the state. You're going to have property values being affected, probably not this year, but next year. But having said that, we're probably getting larger than normal property value protests. So the the state appropriations for 2021 are already set, and it won't be changed unless there's legislative action. So I don't see changes to appropriations for this year that's coming up. I mean, but you never know, right? But I do think that the actual negative impact will be felt in the 2022-2023 legislative biennium when the legislature meets again in January 21st. That's when I think that the impact will be felt and will be discussed by the legislature. So it's important to keep in mind is that for this year that's coming up, larger than usual property value protests are going to come in. So, but the actual impact on property values won't be impacted until 2021 tax year. So we need to be cautious as we approve ongoing expenditures that will have an impact not only on next fiscal year, but the succeeding years. And it also leads to the question of whether the state can continue to sustain those tax cuts that are embedded in House Bill 3. So it's just something that we ought to look at as we go through the budget process, especially for the following year, because that's when the legislature meets. I do think they'll probably be using some rainy day fund to finish up this next school year, but then they're going to have to see what they're going to do with respect to state funding. Are they going to change the funding formula? Or are they going to eliminate some state grants? Something that happened like this, very similar, was back in the recession of 2008 and 9, where the state had an impact back in that, I think, 11-12 biennium. And if, what I remember is that we lost like about $15 million in state revenue that we had to go back and make a lot of changes. I don't know if that's going to play out like that, but it's something that we have to be cognizant of as we're moving forward. So again, it's just something to keep in mind. And just, again, I want to reiterate that the budget process is a dynamic process. We have starting points. That's not how we're going to end up. As we move forward, we get more information, things will change. And so if we go to slide 24, what you have is, this is the budget workshop. We'll discuss the budgets for the general fund, child nutrition program, and debt service, and they're in black, and because they're bolded, because that's what you'll have to adopt by actual motion and so forth. The other budgets we'll also discuss and provide you information, but they'll usually are adopted through consent. And we're going to discuss next time the 2021 compensation proposal. So what we had in our budget isn't what we're going to probably end up with. I mean, it's something that it's up to the board, but it's a starting point. So as we move forward, we can certainly adjust that amount. And so right now we're kind of in a balanced budget. Historically, we've adopted deficit budgets, so it certainly allows us some latitude with moving forward with respect to compensation or lump sum payments and so forth. But that's something that we can discuss the next time. And then we'll discuss the June 2nd budget workshop at that time. So I know I kind of went quickly to the budget presentations. Are there any questions with respect to any of the slide information that I provided you?
Mrs. Nakira?
Yes, sir.
This is Gary. I got some questions.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Mr. Dessa, and I mean, they're not questions. I mean, we were here when the last time we had those budget cuts and stuff that we had to really tighten our belt. Now, guessing that we're going to get into recession, I mean, we all know what's going to happen. This is getting bad. And the truth is, I mean, your job is to be there. You're our money man. And we need you to be brutally honest. Sometimes you have to be. It's one of these times that we need you brutally honest on what's really going on. If you think that we have to hold off on some things, because at the end of the day, I don't want to having to let go our employees or start cutting back on that when we can start saving money now to keep us afloat for the future. If it has to be, instead of getting 20 buses, we get 15 or we get 10, or, we start finding ways to save money right now. In my mind, I think that's the best bet. So we're in the future, we're not, still guessing. Come on now, we all know the state's taking a big hit. And like you said, it might not affect us this year, but it's going to affect us a year or two down the road. And I'd rather us be prepared and make sure that we're ready for it. So our employees are taking care of us, instead of 2 years down the road, we're having to cut back everything and anything that we have to, because we're just, we're going to have to. So if you can, I know it sounded good, but I really need you to be brutally honest with us right now. Okay?
Yes, sir. I will do that. I think it's important to just see what comes up as we go through this process. I will, I feel it's my duty to make sure that I provide you with the best information, and make sure that we sustain the great things that we're doing here at Socorro ISD. And perhaps we can look at some of the things we suggested. But yes, sir. Again, I think there's money in next year's budget, so I think we can certainly sustain commensurate salary increase or some other ones, and perhaps we can cut down on some things, like with respect to the buses. That's a possibility. I'm not saying that we're going to do it. I think it's a possibility. There might be some other things that perhaps we can adjust now, so that maybe next year we'll see what actually comes down. But I'll do my best, sir.
No, and I appreciate that. And I think this is, as board members, these are these tough decisions that right now we're going to have to make, because in the long run, it's going to affect. I don't want this affecting our employees down the road when we can prepare for it now, because it's going to affect us. Let's be honest. Like I said, let's be honest. unless this turns around in the next month or two, which, we're praying to God it does, but we have to be, we really have to have that mindset that this is gonna take a little bit longer than we think. And we gotta be prepared for it. And like I said, at the long run, I don't wanna come down a year or two from now. I might be here, I might not be here as a board member, but those board members, I don't want these new board members or someone else coming in and having to deal with this when we could have dealt with it right now. So that's what I'm saying, as us board members, we're gonna, we're really gonna have to, really dig into this, figure out things that we're gonna have to do now to make sure we're prepared for that year, 2 years down the road. We're not running a chicken with our heads cut off because we didn't prepare for it. I'd rather be prepared for it. And when this comes, we're like, oh, we're great. The photos, like we've always been, we're golden. We've taken care of our people and we've taken care of our students, and we're good to go no matter what. So
Yes.
That's my thought. That's me.
Ms. Nakira, this is Mr. Mena. I have some questions.
Yes, Mr. Mena, please go ahead.
Yes, I agree with Mr. Gandara. Sometimes we do have to tighten up our belt, especially with this hard times that everybody's going through. I do have some questions. Explain to me what a golden penny and how we go about getting a golden penny.
Yes, sir. So what we do is we'll present to you, and as part of the tax rate calculation that I have to do, I have to make certain assumptions. I will reduce the tax rate. And then from there, the state allows us to increase that tax rate to generate additional revenue. And what I do is I just present to the board the total tax rate that we're asking the board to approve. So the Golden Pennies is a state program, Mr. Mena, that allows school districts to increase state funding if they're willing to raise the tax rate. It's based on tax effort. And so if you go, I guess, to slide 11, as I'm saying, it's so when you look at state funding, there's tier 1, which is the basic allotment. It has this visual allotment. But if you look at slide number 11, there's a tier 2 funding, which allows us to go up. Now, from the maximum compressed tax rate, from there, we can go up 17 cents. So it's broken down. 8 are golden pennies. There used to be 6 golden pennies. And last year, we were capturing the full 6 pennies. It was about $30 million. But we were required to reduce it now. Our pennies, where we only got 4 pennies last year. So it's a state program, Mr. Mena, that allows a school district to generate additional revenue, provided that you increase the tax rate by those pennies. So it's in other words, it'll reward us if we increase the tax rate. So currently what we're looking at is at least a half a penny, a little less than half a penny decrease, in the tax rate for the taxpayers of Socorro ISD. And it could be more as we get our property values. And like I said, on that slide, you'll see if it's 6%, then we'll go down to almost 90 cents. And if you add 5 cents, it's 95 cents. So it would be a 2 cent decrease. Now, if you look at that bottom bullet, Mr. Mena and board members, I forgot, I don't know if I mentioned this or not, but this year, the Texas Education Agency is going to determine our tax rate. Ordinarily, I would get the values from the Central Appraisal District in late July. I would calculate the tax rate. I would publish it that first week in August, and then we would adopt it in the regular board meeting in August. Well, this year, the state's going to tell us, this is your tax rate. This is the one you have to approve. But they're going to be basing it on the values that are probably going to go up in late July. So I don't know if we're going to be able to get that tax rate that we have to adopt that's been calculated by TA by the time that the August board meeting is being held. Not only that, I have to publish the meeting, the proposed tax rate, the budget, 10 days prior to the meeting. So I don't know if we'll have that. So it's possible that we might have to push the adoption of the tax rate until September. The law says that we have 60 days after the receipt of our certified property values, which is late July, to adopt the tax rate. So just keep in mind that, I don't know what's going to happen, but I just want to remind the board or just let you know this might happen. So it was a long answer. I hope I was able to answer your questions.
No, that's good. My other question was, 4 pennies, it's obviously good that if the board votes unanimously on the 5 pennies. But why the big difference and why the big push, on the
So-
unanimous board vote?
So I don't know, the legislature had, that it had to be a unanimous vote this year. And also last year, I think we had to have a voice vote because it had to be unanimous too to get the 4 pennies. So it's saying, look, you have to have a unanimous vote for next year. After that, it could be a majority vote. So I can't explain why so what I'm saying is that I can't speak for the board members, but when we talk about the tax rate, the board members can say, yes, we can agree to adding 5 pennies to the MCR. Or if one board members or 2 board members or 3 board members say, no, I want to reduce the tax rate further, then we'll be losing that money. Again, it's because it's based on that $98.56 per watt in revenue that we're getting for every penny that we increase it.
Okay, yeah, it's kind of Chinese to me, but I'm sorry, I'm learning. For the
No,
May,
if you ever call me and ask me questions, I'll certainly be available for you.
yeah, no, for the May 5th meeting, is there any way that we can get this information a little bit earlier?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I have maybe a couple of hours, not even an hour to go through this. And I think it's very crucial and important that we're informed of everything that's going down because if we're going to be tighten up our belts, with buses and maybe laptops and non-essential items that need to, we need to really sit down and talk about this and have somebody explain this to us, because a lot of times it's pretty intense, and it's something that's very important, especially when it's affecting the tax rate. And I just feel that we need more information, as much information as you can throw on us, which with a lot of time, maybe a week before, so we can sit down with a nice cup of coffee in the morning and read it a couple of times, make questions, notes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You know what I mean? But thank you.
Yes, sir. Without a doubt, my apologies. But yes, for sure, the next time we'll get it to you. If you'd like, we'll get it to you at least a week ahead of time. It'll be a lot more information. It'll be the budget, a lot more detail, not only the revenues, but the expenditures. It'll give you a comparison again as to our proposed budget compared to what our revised budget is currently and what was adopted. So it gives you a better idea of what it is. But without a doubt, we'll endeavor to make sure that you have it at least a week ahead of time. And that way you can look at it and hopefully it won't be new to you when we have the workshop.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions?
President Nahara, this is Mr. Guerra.
Yes, sir, Mr. Guerra.
Mr. Lessa, thank you for the presentation. So I have a couple of questions. This being
Yes, sir.
a biennial year from House Bill 3, so do we know the exact dollar amount that we're receiving already as an allotment?
So what we have to do is we have to earn it, Mr. Guerra. And so this year there were some new allotments that we're still through our attendance trying to determine what that is. So we have a good idea what it is. I also want to emphasize that we get funded out of six-week period throughout the year. So it's the average of six-week periods. Well, this year, before the pandemic, it went through the first 4 weeks. So the first 4 weeks were normal. We haven't been to school since then. So we're trying to determine from TA, how are they going to determine what our average daily attendance is going to be? So some of the direction we've gotten, some of the feedback we've gotten is they're going to probably use the first 4-6 weeks as a basis. And then they know that school district traditionally, our average daily attendance kind of goes down those last 2 6-week periods because it's spring, seniors they're going to graduate. So they're going to make some adjustment for those 2 weeks. We know that the 5th, 6 weeks, we weren't at school. So chances are they're saying, well, you need to send us some documentation attestations that school's not in place so that we don't have to count it. And then we'll see if we don't have any school anymore, we'll have some kind of factor that takes into consideration the fact that there's usually an adjustment for the last 2 weeks. So I have an idea and I can provide that information to you, maybe this weekend, Mr. Guerra, but to know exactly what it is, I can't tell you until I get more direction from TA.
Sure, I understand, but I mean, we have an idea.
Yes, sir. So look, with respect to, and I did provide that information to the finance committee, and I'll provide that to the board hopefully this weekend, a spreadsheet where it kind of showed that based on our original revenues for last year compared to what I think we're going to earn, it's about an additional $25 million. And so keep in mind that when a new legislative session starts, that first year, there's a significant bump or increase. In that second year of the biennium, it pretty much stays the same. So I can certainly provide you that information. And then just keep in mind is that it's a basis of what I think we're going to earn. And we'll go from there.
Also, another question was regarding the TASB study compensation. When are we going to finish with that study?
I know that we're finishing it up. I'll have to follow up with Mr. Campoya. I guess the question is, do we move forward with it or do we hold off for a year? But I'll follow up with Mr. Campoya, and perhaps we can provide some additional information.
Because that's a big factor, because if we do move forward with that steady compensation, TASB comes back and there's an increase, obviously that's going to be a big factor.
Yes, sir. And so let me find out and talk to Mr. Campoya and Dr. Espinosa and then the cabinet, and perhaps we can follow up where we are with that from the board at that time.
President Nahara, this is Selena Stiles.
Yes, Ms. Stiles.
Hi, good evening, President Nahara, Dr. Espinosa, members of the board, Mr. Guerra, Mr. Ressa, good evening. I do have some information regarding that. We are set to have a follow-up meeting with TASB on the 7th of April to get all the preliminary results of everything. Our intention was to provide an update at the next workshop on kind of TASB's recommendations.
Great, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Ms. Stiles.
Thank you.
And Mr. Ressa, one last question. Just like last year, and at the end of the day, we are going to have to raise taxes so we don't lose no money, correct?
Well, let me rephrase that, Mr. Guerra. In other words, it's going to be a tax decrease. It will be, because even though we do the calculation where we reduce it, and then it goes back up, whatever point that we end up with is going to be lower than the current M&O tax rate. So it'll be a tax decrease. The question is how much? Right now, we're projecting a little about half a penny, like about 4/10 of a cent. But based on the valuations that we get, it could be more, And again, I don't want to give you some examples of the value growth that we get, kind of give you an idea. But it'll be a decrease. It'll be a decrease. It's just how much. It may not be enough for some people, but it'll be a decrease.
Thank you, Mr. Ressa.
Ms. Nahara,
Welcome,
I have
sir.
another question. This is Mr. Mena.
Yes, Mr. Mena, go ahead.
Yes, Tony, one last thing. The transportation allotment is now being funded by the per mile and not a linear mile. How is that going to impact us as far as getting, especially now that we're not moving any buses, which is impacting us now as we speak? Is that going to cost us money now?
My guess it is, Mr. Mena. Right now, we haven't gotten any kind of direction with respect to TA as to how we're going to make up those loss of miles because we're not transporting kids. What they like I mentioned before, they have talked about average daily attendance, but they haven't said anything about transportation. It's something that we'll have to follow up with them. But it stands right now. I mean, we're moving forward at least currently with the
Tony, I don't think that's fair due to the fact of what's happening because of this pandemic. I think this thing should be null and void for now.
I agree, or at least somehow annualize the amount of miles that we've incurred through March the 15th in some manner, and that way perhaps make us whole. But
Exactly.
but I haven't heard anything. We haven't got any direction on that. We'll certainly inform the board once we get some information. But at this point in time, if nothing's done, we're going to lose revenue, no doubt about it.
From not our fault.
Exactly.
Thank you, Tony.
So yeah.
Are there any other questions?
Yes, Ms. Nahara?
Go ahead.
Yes, sir, Mr. Morales, go ahead.
Yeah, just piggybacking on what Mr. Gandara and Mr. Mena had mentioned in regards to tightening up our budget. I believe that maybe we should consider not putting a freeze on any more hires. I know the last time there was I guess it was we had a opening for a chief compliance officer. That there was probably about $100,000. We could probably look if we don't need any personnel. Again, another position was the principal. We were looking at Socorro High School. That's probably another $100,000. Two positions that we can probably hold off on for the reason that school's not really in session right now, and obviously it won't be in session for a while or to be announced. But anyhow, I just thought I had that concern.
Yes, sir, Mr. Morales. I just want to inform the board that, I mean, there's certain positions that we need to move forward with and fill them. And I understand, I certainly respect your consideration and your thoughts on this. But, with respect to some of the programs and allotments that we have to move forward with hiring teachers. We have to move forward with certain things. So it's important that maybe some positions are filled.
And I agree. I certainly agree with that. However, we have to be strategic and realize these got to be on priority. These positions that we're looking at, we have to. They're going to have to be at needed positions that are going to be necessary to keep our district afloat.
Yes, sir.
Are there any further questions?
Yes, President Nahara?
Yes, sir, Dr. Espinosa, go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with some of the comments that were shared by all the trustees. What Mr. Morales said is true. Our teams many times are looking for those extra positions, but because of the time, just like Mr. Morales stated, we may have to say no to some positions, but like was emphasized, there's some positions that we do need, but we may have to put the brakes on many positions, which us as a team, as a leadership team, and even at the campus, leadership, we'll monitor that. We'll continue to monitor that. But I agree with Mr. Mena and Mr. Gandara that we're going to have to tighten up our belts. I just want to thank Mr. Reza for his presentation, because we all know Mr. Reza's he's conservative, but there's just a lot of unknown factors with what has happened here with the coronavirus. Like he stated several times, this is a starting point. These are starting points. Things will change, whether they may be change for the worse or change for the positive, but I think it's a starting point. Like Mr. Gandara stated, the last thing we want to happen, whether it's now or whether it's next year or 2 years from now, because this will impact in the future, our employees losing positions because of what is going on. So, a lot of big decisions need to be made, but I just can't thank the trustees enough. Thank you. And obviously, like I said earlier, Mr. Reza, thank you, Mr. Reza. Thank you, President Nahara.
Mr. Mena, one last question for Mr. Reza. One last question. I'm sorry.
Yes, sir, Mr. Mena, go ahead.
Mr. Reza, our rainy day fund, where is it right now?
I believe, sir, that we have about $105 million in our unassigned fund balance. So when you look at our reserves, our fund balance, there's certain pockets of money in there. Some are you can't touch and so forth. So the unassigned portion of it, that's the amount that we can certainly consider and use as the board wishes. So I believe it's about $105 million currently.
The other question I have, Mr. Reza, when was the last time the board used that fund and for what reason? And when would be a good reason to use it?
So best practices say that we use it for one-time expenditures. I believe we used it several years ago to use some committed funds for infrastructure needs and so forth. But I'd have to gather that information and provide that to the board this weekend. But we've used it various years, Mr. Mena. Again, they're for ongoing expenses. That's best practices. Also keep in mind is that we're looking at possibly using that with respect to a construction project with respect to Socorro High School and some other, because we have some budget challenges in that respect. So that would certainly be a very appropriate use of those funds. But ordinarily, these are for one-time capital outlays that we use it for.
Okay, thank you, Tony. I just wanted to, find out how much was in there. Thank you.
Are there any further questions? Mr. Reza, thank you so much.
You're welcome. ma'am.
We're going to now continue with item 3, new business. A, consider approval of Socorro ISD health plan design changes. Mr. Carmona?
Good evening, Board President Nájera, Dr. Espinosa, members of the board. This is Mayra Carmona, Director of Employee Benefits and Risk Management at Socorro ISD. I'd like to mention that I have also included in this call Mr. Lou Arias, who is with Gallagher, which is our health plan and risk management consultant. This evening, we're going to be covering health plan projections for fiscal year 21. And also we'll be reviewing fixed cost estimates, financial assumptions and projections, which are based on 12 months worth of data, rebate timeline for Express Scripts, our pharmacy benefits manager, our current benefits plan highlights, and a projection for the 2020 on the current benefits. If I'm not mistaken, the board at this point has a copy of the presentation previously provided during last month's board meeting, and it's titled Board Workshop 2011-20 Plan Projections for Fiscal 21. The presentation, the contents of the presentation are focused on, again, projection assumptions, rebate timeline for Express Scripts, plan change alternatives, and next steps. And I think that one thing that has been highlighted through Mr. Reza's presentation is the factor of the pandemic and what this could have, the financial impact that could have in our financial status. So that also could play a role in our health fund, since we don't know if and how many cases could possibly be looked at throughout this current plan year. But we'll do our best in going over the assumptions in terms of data. If I may, in your presentation, we'll start with slide number 5, which highlights the current benefits offered to Socorro ISD employees. The current enrollment at the very bottom, we have under the Premier Plan enrolled around 1,700 lives. Under the base plan, 3,400. Under the high deductible plan, roughly 100. And under an alternative plan, which is the indemnity plan, close to 200, with a grand total of roughly 5,500 employees. Now, if I may, I'd like for Mr. Arias to go over the 3 alternatives that will cover the proposed, or I should say, the calculated rate action that's being looked at, and how the plan change or which plan change of the 3 and the impact that would have in terms of that calculated rate.
Mr. Carmona, Lou Arias's audio is not connected at the moment, sir.
Okay, I apologize for that. I'll make sure to get in touch with him, and I'm sure he's listening at this point. But if I may, I'll start with option number 1. That will be slide number 9. And in this, I apologize. He's trying to, Mr. Arias is trying to connect, but I don't think he's able to do so.
Mr. Carmona, this is Ms. Rodriguez.
Yes, ma'am.
Something that we tried this morning in a meeting that I held, if Mr. Arias can call you via phone and you put your phone on mic, then we should be able to hear him through the phone. I think that might actually work if he's able to join in. And again, if he's having difficulties logging in, then he may be able to participate via phone on speakerphone to share the information. Like I said, it's something that we tried this morning and it worked well. Just FYI.
Thank you, ma'am. I think he can hear us now, but I don't know that he's able to speak. But I'll go ahead and try. I'll do that while I go over the presentation on, and again, I'll start with, if I may, with plan change option number 1. And again, what we're looking at is a total percentage that needs to be or could possibly be divided among the 2 variables, which are the employees and the school district. So what we're trying to do is, what could be the possible change to be able to eliminate some of the deficit that we have, or the gap that we need to cover. On plan change option number 1, slide number 8, you'll see that on the Premier plan, there is a highlighted area under emergency room. And the option here would be to increase the emergency room copay from $200 to $500. And for then, a plan will cover 90% of the expenses. On the base plan, the proposed change would be for the out-of-pocket maximum for single and family to increase to $5,000 and $10,000 quarterly. And the other 2 plans available, which are the high deductible plan and the indemnity plan, will remain as is, no changes proposed to those options. Then, if I may, I'm going to jump over to option number 2, which is slide number 11, just so I can stay focused on the proposed changes before we actually get into the numbers. I have the Premier plan at lowering the coverage from 90% to 85%, and including the emergency room copay as well to $500. The base plan, increasing the out-of-pocket maximum to $5,000 and $10,000, and reducing the coverage from 80% to 75%. And in this particular option as well, a proposed increased copay for the emergency room to $500. Lastly, the third option would be to increase equally a same amount percentage, and let me get to that slide so I can tell you which slide I'm looking at. Slide number 13. On this slide, you'll see the current premium amount, the incurred amount, and what the employee will need to pay total, depending on the level of coverage. So let's say that in this particular scenario, option 2, we have out of the 3 options, an even split, and between the employee and the school district of 13.4%. That would mean that the cost per employee per month will now be $652.02. If I may, I'm going to pause. I think Mr. Arias. Can you hear me, Mr. Arias?
No, yes, sir. He's still trying to connect.
Okay.
Your call has been forwarded to.
I apologize. While I try to connect with Mr. Arias, I don't know if there's any questions at this point.
Your call has been forwarded.
Ms. Naked, I have a question. This is Mr. Mena, by the way.
Go ahead,
Yes,
Mr. Mena.
Go ahead.
I'm an actual factual man. How much more is the plan gonna go up as far as the premier and the base plan and the high deductible? How much are we talking here? $20, $40?
So if we may, Mr. Mena, we could look at the slide number 13, which is titled Plan Option 2 for fiscal year 2020. And that shows a change or an increment of 13.4%. So looking at the Premier plan, it would go from 160 to 181.
So you're talking about $21 more a month. This is monthly, right?
Correct. Assuming that the employee would increase, or we would increase the employee's rate by 13.4, and the school district would increase its contribution from 575 to 652.
So we're gonna do some increasing on our own?
It's a proposed.
Go ahead.
I apologize. It's a proposed change. On that slide, you'll see the 3 different options on the right-hand side of that table. So if it's an even split of 13.4%, then yes, that would entail an increase on the school district. On the option in the middle titled All EES, All Employee, that means that the SISD per employee per month will remain at 575, but the rate would increase from 160 to 244.16 for the employee.
So then you're saying from 650, okay, wait a minute. How much more? What's the difference? Like $52?
If you're looking at the employee paying the entire premium, it's on the Premier plan, it's around $80.
Okay, and if the school district kicks in, how much more is that gonna be?
If the school district increases 13.4% as well, the employee will only see an increment of $21.44.
How much more money will the school district have to kick in right now per employee and the amount of the employees? How much? Give me a number, or give us a number.
Around $75.
$75 times 55? Is that what you told me? 5,500 employees?
Correct.
So Mr. Mena, that is just a slide that shows what would it be if it was split among the employee and the district and an increase just for the employees. Currently, we don't have any kind of consideration in adding to what the district puts in for the employee because we put in about $575 per month. I think if you're looking at that, if we were to do that, it would be about another $5 million that we would be adding into the budget. So
Right, that's what I was thinking. I was like, wait a minute here.
So the thing is, we have to keep in mind is this, we're offering the board certain proposals to reduce our healthcare costs. Currently, as of February, our healthcare plan is in the red by $3.7 million. That's how much we're in the red. Now, we currently have a $9 million surplus, or I should say reserve. I don't want to say surplus, I'm sorry. A reserve in the healthcare plan. So it's down to about $5.3 million is what we have. And at the end of the year, what we do is we've been putting in an additional amount over the $575 per month. We've been putting in about $9 million at the end of the year into the healthcare plan to be able to make sure that it's in the black. So right now, that's just a slide that shows what the cost would be if the district puts it in. And that's not our recommendation right now. It's important to consider that we have to make some changes because we can't continue with the current plan that we have. Now, we do have the clinic and it has been very effective. There are people that are going, our employees are meeting it. And it's gonna take some time to be able to see the effects of that. But keep in mind is that what we're trying to do is tweak the plan. So certainly those employees that are using the plan, especially with the hospitalization out of pocket, are the ones who certainly pay for it. But if you have a healthy lifestyle, if you're in and everything's going well, hopefully it won't be that much of an increase for you. But I just want to make sure I inform the board that currently we don't have anything in our budget that would increase our contribution towards the healthcare plan. It's just a slide that kind of shows what the impact would be if it was an even split and then how much for the employee or how much it would be if the district itself picked up the whole cost. I think that's that bottom tab of the presentation.
Mr. Bishop, we're gonna vote on this today, right?
Yes, sir, but it was my understanding that the presentation would be on changes to the healthcare plan where the employee would be certainly impact some of that change, some of those changes. Now, the board can decide whether they want to make those changes. The board can decide, no, we're gonna see how the clinic is doing, and we'll see if we can do this another year. I'm just giving you some information that we have to at some point make a decision about what we're going to do about changing or tweaking our healthcare plan. Because as it stands, we can't continue not doing anything. We have to do something. And the district is absorbing a lot of the cost, which is great. We do that for our employees without a doubt. But it is impacting our ability to provide funding for other areas, whether it be instructional, whether it be compensation. There's only so much in the pot for those different areas.
Right, I understand, Tony, yes. Thank you, Tony. There's a lot of information being thrown at me personally. And I need to make a decision here. We need to make a decision. But I wish I had more time. I just wish I had more time to go and read it. See, I'm a factual man. I need to know, I need to see things. But thank you, Tony. I appreciate you. Thank you.
Mrs. Nájera? Gary Gondara?
Yes, sir, Mr. Candida. Go ahead.
Just so Mr. Mena knows, Mr. Mena, for the past couple of years, we've been putting into our employee health fund. I think last year we put in, what, 9 million, Mr. Reza, if I'm correct?
That's correct, sir.
And the year previous?
The same amount.
9 million. We've been doing that. We've been doing that, Mr. Mena, to help out our employees, to make sure that their coverage stays low. That's something this board has been doing, and I hope we continue doing to help out our employees. Because first and foremost, our employees need to be taken care of. Their health needs to be taken care of. I mean, that's why we've been doing what we've been doing, because, without them, there is no SISD. There's not. We need to make sure we provide the best for our employees, so we keep the best employees. So again, that's what we've been doing the past couple of years to help with the cost of healthcare for our employees. So just to give you a little background on it.
No, Mr. Gata, I'm on board with you as far as that goes. And I wish we could give them more. I wish we can give our employees a lot more. If I could, I would have them pay anything. But it's obviously that with these hard times, may have to tighten up our belts a little bit. I would wish I had more time to go and review these things. That's what I'm saying. And I agree, and I agree with what you're saying, Mr. Andra, as far as the $9 million. I hope we continue to do that. But no, thank you for the.
President Nájera, Paul Garcia.
Yes, Mr. Garcia.
Thank you, ma'am. Is this something that needs to be voted on today, or is it possible?
It's my understanding that if the board can decide to make no changes at this time, which will mean we have an influx to cover again this year. But if we don't make it today, then the changes will be too late because they have open enrollment for insurance. And so employees have to know what they're signing up for. So we either make no changes or we vote for the change today.
Mrs.
That's
Nájera,
correct.
this is Ms. Rodriguez. And this is just, I'm glad you mentioned the open enrollment. When would the open enrollment process begin?
Mrs. Nájera, I believe the open enrollment is going to be scheduled for the first week in May. I think.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chief, just to let you know, I believe Mr. Arias has been able to connect, but yes, Mr. Reza, if I'm not mistaken, we, as a result to everything that's going on with employees not being on site and minimizing the contact among employees and visiting and so on, we have been speaking with our third-party administrator to where we can push the open enrollment period to start May 1st.
So, Ms. Nájera, this is Ms. Rodriguez again. Mr. Carmona, so with that being said, in all actuality, how much time from the time the board makes a decision on this would you need to be prepared for May 1st? And how long is that open enrollment gonna look? I mean, how long, and let's be honest, it doesn't look like we're actually, I mean, based on all the information that I'm seeing on the news and all the information that we've got coming out, it doesn't look like this is gonna happen anytime real soon. So I'm assuming everything is gonna have to be done online, virtually, where employees are gonna have to, select their plans, again, virtually. So I guess what I'm trying to ask is how much time, just to be able to give us a little bit more time to be able to make a well-informed decision. We do have some new board members on board. It seems like we still have a lot of questions, and again, I understand the predicament that we're in with regard to the funding that's coming from the state and everything else that we need to look at. However, what would be the latest day that we could make a decision if we choose not to make a decision this evening? Which would be what's the latest date that we could move forward on making a decision to be able to allow you and your team to roll this out to employees?
So if we're looking at starting May 1st, I would say if possible by no later than April 20th, that will give us time to convey the information to our vendors so we can have systems set up accordingly. And for us to be able to prepare a communication district-wide and be able to provide us, and address as many questions as possible before the actual open enrollment period. We typically have open enrollment for the entire month. So in this case, will be through the month of May. And in speaking with our third-party administrator, we're working on exactly what you just made reference to, which is over the phone, virtually, have educational videos and so on and so forth be available on the phone so we can address as many questions or concerns as possible. So I would say no less than 7 business days, but if a date would be to look at, I would say possibly, again, April 20th.
President Nájera?
Yes, Dr. Espinosa.
Yes, I know Ms. Macias, we had every day we're meeting as cabinet. We had talked about asking the trustees for a board meeting next week to go approve some policy. So maybe we can include this in here if we were to have one here in the near future. Just a thought, because we were going to be at Ms. Macias. Is that correct, Ms. Macias? I don't know if Ms. Macias is on. I'm pretty sure she is.
Yes, sir. We were looking at the week of April 13th. If you all could give us a date for a special board meeting. These are policies that we have to bring to you based on COVID-19 for graduation, for loss of credit, for many other things. It would be a perfect venue if you all would give us a date on the week of April 13th.
So I'm just throwing that out to the trustees for something to consider that. And Mr. Carmona just said that they would have to know by April 20th. Mr. Carmona, so if that week of April 13th, I'm looking at the calendar, you think that'll be sufficient time for you if the trustees, agree to have a special board meeting?
Yes, Dr. Espinosa, I'm sure we can work on that.
President Nájera, this is Ms. Rodriguez again.
Yes, Ms. Rodriguez.
If at all possible, and again, I still think we have a lot of questions with regard to the rollout of this plan. I would like for us as a board to consider that, giving us a little bit more time to actually look at the information. That's one of the things that we've always prided ourselves in our district. And again, I understand year after year we're paying about $9 million into the plan. However, with that being said, we've always been with that thought in mind that that's one of the things that we pride ourselves in making sure we're providing excellent healthcare coverage to our employees at a very affordable cost. I would just like for us to consider possibly making that decision and in our next April special board meeting, if at all possible.
Ms. Nájera, this is Mr. Mena.
Okay, Mr. Mena, if you'll give me just a moment, please. I would like to just let the board know, yes, these are extremely difficult decisions to make, but I also don't want anyone to think that Human Resources has thrown us at this at the last minute. We did receive this information in a board workshop on February 11th. And if it is the board's decision not to make a vote tonight, we do need some direction to be able to give to HR about what questions the board does have so that those can be addressed, but if we decide to wait until April. Mena, you had a question?
Yeah, Ms. Nájera. Yes, I understand that we received this information back in February. I apologize for not reading it. I have it in front of me now, and I will look at it every day and make questions and calculations. But I agree with Ms. Rodriguez, as far as the 13th. I am all forward for that date.
I think as cabinet and, we're good with the 13th.
Does anyone else have any other questions?
Yes, this is Lou Alice with Gallery. Can you all hear me now?
Sorry, Mr. Arias, it was really hard to understand you.
You're all hear me on here, or is this not a good connection?
Hey, does Mr. Arias work at McDonald's right now?
No, sir.
If someone's trying to get an order from you right now.
For some reason, I couldn't use my phone. I'm using my computer. I don't think the microphone on the computer is any better. I apologize.
Can you repeat that? We did not understand what you said.
Can't hear
If I
you.
may, I think he's having trouble again. He might be already disconnected.
I
So
think my microphone on my computer is not.
I believe he's saying that the connection through his computer is no better than through his phone. But if I may, I can make sure to possibly address any questions or anything that you'd like for me to bring back to the meeting in the month of April.
That would be great, Mr. Carmona. If any board members have specific questions or areas that they want to look at, if you could please notify Mr. Carmona so that he can prepare those.
Wow, what is it? How is it? What is it? What is it at right now?
69.
It's at 69 degrees? But it's still at 69 degrees? That's what
Your
it says?
mic is on, Mr. Canada.
Mr.
I
Gonda,
apologize.
it's 69.
Hot mic, hot
I'm
mic.
sorry. It's, someone turned off the heater. Someone forgot to turn on the air conditioner. It's getting hot in here.
And so for item 3A, the consider approval of Socorro ISD health plan changes. It is my understanding that the board would like to delay this until a board workshop to be scheduled the week of April 13th. Is that correct?
President Nahara, this is Mr. Guerra.
Yes, Mr. Guerra.
I believe you would need a motion to make the change. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
I'd like to make a motion to consider approval of Socorro ISD health plan and design changes till the next special board meeting, April 13th.
So, Mr. Mena, I'll second that.
Okay, I have a motion by Mr. Guerra and a second by Mr. Mena to postpone the changes to the health plan design until a later date. I would now do a roll call for votes. Ms. Rodriguez,
Aye.
Mr. Guerra,
Aye.
Mr. Gondeta,
Aye.
Mr. Mena,
Aye.
Mr. Garcia,
Hi.
Mr. Morales,
Aye.
and the motion carries. If there is no further business before this board, we are adjourned and the time is 6:59. Thank you all so much for joining us.